And so when I think about Gaviota or Naples, I think, is it going to go under the knife, just like every other place has gone under the knife, with greed as the foundation for development, and this never-ending growth machine that for 50 or 60 years has undermined the integrity, the ecological integrity, and the communities of Southern California. Ancient communities, in the case of the Chumash, who lived along the coastal valleys and ridges and watersheds of the Gaviota for 10, 11,000 years. That's at stake today, the sacredness of Gaviota and the sacredness of Naples. That profit motive has driven Southern California development since the 1930s and 1940s. It is a cycle of development where consultants, lawyers, developers, political representations at the county level work in unison and to sustain growth and the ideal or worldview of growth. And so coastal development in California, in particular, is a byproduct of that growth machine, this cohesive alliance. And it's very important to recognize that suburban sprawl is a relatively recent land use. So from a philosophical perspective, the interface between the city, or let's say downtown Santa Barbara, where the urban component is, the natural spaces, those open spaces, and the farmland will determine the future of Santa Barbara. And right now, it's an unsustainable relationship. And so when we disregard the open space of Gaviota or the farmland in Goleta, you know, the good land, when we disavow or deny the value of that farmland to the city, we see it as vacant land, what Thomas Jefferson referred to as the vacant land, the land that can be developed. A very important thing about Naples area is the Dos Pueblos Creek area. If you look at the old history books about the homesteaders and the first settlers of the region, the Dos Pueblos Creek was considered the wildest watershed on the Gaviota, and perhaps in Santa Barbara County. It's where you brought a gun because there were animals in that watershed. Incredible floodplain, incredible riparian area, bobcats and mountain lions and brown bear, perhaps, in the 1840s, 1830s, in that watershed, and salmon. And Chinook is now a ghost salmon. And one of the things that I fear is that Gaviota is a ghost. Is it turning into a ghost too? And how many ghosts can we handle as human beings? You know, I mean, we're surrounded by ghosts. And in many ways, Naples and the creeks of Gaviota are literally the embodiment of a fluid medium of water with those 34 creeks, you know, and 34 watersheds. It's a fluid medium. But the whole intertidal area is essentially a wetland ecosystem, a very important nursery to the ocean, nursery to the sea. A lot of juvenile rockfishes, kelp species, but in particular, what scientists have shown is that this area is probably one of the top 3 kelp areas in the Southern California area because of the invertebrate population. Very rich invertebrate population. In fact, the #1 area for invertebrates in Southern California in this kelp system. It's a very short little coastal plain, coastal valley, and in the winter, in the El Nino rainfall, that is a fluid medium that we call the land. You know, a lot of things happening, a lot of animals, and I think it really is the last bastion of a lost landscape, you know, Southern California. LA, San Gabriel rivers at one time met. And there were what ecologists call a staircase of ecosystems that followed from that interface of those rivers with the coast and the marine environment. 18,000 acres of wetlands at the mouth of the LA San Gabriel River, 1840, 1850. The birds that came down, the waterfowl, deafening to the ears. The hunters talk about how they had to cover their ears in the migrations, the waterfowl migrations coming down, and it was so loud. We have a place where the largest concentration of blue whales in the world is right off coast. It is so dynamic and so complex and ever-changing, and in it are at every layer, every water column, for example, in the channel, are these living entities that depend on that dynamic complexity. I have flown with dolphins in surf. I've seen a half-moon sky with the smell of sage in the air and gold poppies on the beach. And these sort of aesthetic notions are sublime, but they define you. They define you as a person. And it's hard not to feel deeply when they're threatened. You know, it's hard. How often do we need to compromise on a sunset? The major impact of development, coastal development, will often be that you'll increase public access and you'll increase the human uses of an area like this. So if you end up with a lot more people on the beach, these seals out here won't use this area anymore as a haul out. The brown pelicans or the least terns, both on the endangered species list, won't use this area anymore. And if you go back to the 1920s and you look at the old archival films that are available through the Smithsonian or archive.com, you can see these old black and white commercials and PSAs funded by the mortgage bankers in Southern California that promoted sprawl and the suburban dream, the American dream with the white picket fence, as the good life, away from the city, etc. And in my own personal memory, I grew up right next to an old Victorian, which had a huge farm on it, citrus farm and green beans. You know, Orange County was full of green beans and oranges and other types of orchards, strawberries, just like here in some respects, just like Santa Maria in northern part of the county here. And that old house that we used to thought was a ghost house, you know, it was abandoned, turned into a mini mall, and the farm was removed, paved over. So row upon row, house upon house was removed for a larger scale development and subdivision. This is the plot that I see Gaviota falling into. The plot being, well, with the mansion is it. That's the end of the development. But in reality, the speculative house that's built on the foothill that drives the housing size up and up and up and up to get more and more return for the property contributes to a future subdivision, and it contributes to more growth, and it contributes to this vicious cycle. So we end up with a big mansion on the coast. Don't let anyone tell you that that's the end in itself, but rather it's the first step towards suburbanization. And I know I've worked with the developers here in town in terms of trying to work out a vision or some land use recommendations, and they think that this is the end, that a mansion on the foothill is the end. But it's only the end as far as the person who lives in that home perceives it as the end.